Hello fellow readers and readresses! January is over, which means that it's time to talk about the books that I've been able to complete in the first month of the year. January was kind of middle of the road type of month. It wasn't my best, but it definitely wasn't my worst either. We can run through some numbers quickly. I managed to read 6 books during the month, 4 of which were fantasy, 1 was science fiction, and 1 was non-fiction. All but 1 of the books that I read were adult, and 1 was young adult, but more so on the younger side of young adult, I would call it. And for once in my life, I actually physically owned every single one of the books that I read, with a little bit of an asterisk because one of the books I purchased, but it hasn't arrived yet. As I already mentioned, I read 6 books, and that is 2 less than my monthly average so far. And in terms of pages, I read 3,132 pages, which is basically my monthly average. I think that's a great result. And now let's talk about the books that I read in the order in which I picked them up. And the first book we're going to talk about is Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine. This is a young adult fantasy and the first book in the Ella Enchanted series. I'm not sure about the name of the series. I technically picked this one up in December, on the 31st of December, but I read like 5 pages of it, so I count it as fully read in January. Now, it took me absolutely forever to read this book, and that was mostly because I was having a rather mediocre time reading it. With that being said, I don't think this is a bad book. In fact, I can understand why so many people love it, but I think it's mostly because they read it when they were younger. You know how there are those middle grade books that you can read at any age and you will still enjoy them no matter what? Well, sadly, this is not one of those books, at least in my personal opinion. I do believe that if I read it when I was like 13, 14, 15, 16, maybe even 20, I would have had way better time than I did right now. The truth is, though, that even though I found the story quite entertaining in a lot of ways, I didn't care. That was the thing. It's all blur in my head. I felt like it was aggressively average. And so I gave the book 3 stars, and although I didn't have the best time reading it, I still think it will be a great read for younger teenagers. I think they will get a lot from it. The next book I picked up, and I actually picked it up on the 1st of January, was Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. This is an adult standalone fantasy, technically standalone, but it's actually part of the Cosmere, which is the universe that the author has written so many books in. The story is told in a very whimsical type of way, kind of like a fairy tale for grown-ups, and I had the best time reading it. First, because of the writing style of the author. I think he has outdone himself in a lot of ways, because the narrator of the story is actually not him. It is one of the Cosmere characters, and the author has managed to adapt his writing style to suit that narrator, but also because the world building is so amazing and the characters were so likable and so easy to root for and to follow. And I'm not going to say much more about the book because I have a full review of it, and I'm going to link it over here if you'd like to see it. Long story short, I gave it 5 stars, and I highly recommend it if you're interested in the Cosmere at all. Oh, by the way, something that I think is very important, please, before you pick this book up, make sure that you read through the already published Cosmere novels prior to it, because it contains a lot of spoilers about the Cosmere, and you're also going to miss out on a lot of Easter eggs if you didn't familiarize yourself with the Cosmere prior to it. The next book I picked up was part of the 12 books that were recommended to me by 12 friends to read in the year 2023. I will link the video over here if you're interested. And that is The 3-Body Problem by Cixin Liu. This is an adult science fiction novel and the first book in the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy. It is a science fiction that leans very heavily on the science, so keep that in mind before you pick this one up. It is set predominantly in China and follows a few different timelines, one of which is way in the past. I'm having a bit of a hard time describing what the book is about because it has a little bit more complicated structure than most books do. If you've read 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke, you probably will understand what I mean. The book is kind of structured in a similar way, where the storyline in the past focuses on some specific things that do have impact on the present day, but the themes of the story seem to be different in the different timelines. As a lot of the science fiction novels, this one addresses some philosophical questions, but also ethical and moral, and such that question humanity as a whole. We have some history, some mystery, some space travel, some quantum mechanics, some astrophysics, some politics, and a first contact with aliens, or the beginnings of it. The story is masterfully written, and you can see that the author has a lot of knowledge on the topics that he is discussing in this book. I had a great great time reading it and gave it 5 stars, but I am a little bit hesitant to recommend it because it is very heavy on the science and on the dry facts, so that might turn some people off. As I already mentioned, this was part of my reading challenge to read 12 books recommended by 12 friends in this year, but it also doubled up as part of my Adventure in Eldia reading challenge for January. This is a reading challenge created by G from Book Roast that is set in her magical world of Aurelium. I will link her channel and the videos over here if you're interested to watch them. I think you should, they're great. And so for that reading challenge, I needed to start a new series. I don't know if you can see, there you go. And I did by starting the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy. The next book I picked up was A Clash of Kings by George R. Martin. This is an adult fantasy and the second book in a Song of Ice and Fire series. Spoiler alert, this is one of my favorite series out there. I have read it and reread it multiple times, and I don't even know which number reread this is for me. And I gave it 5 stars as always, and I had the best time. But there is something strange about this book. Somehow I find this book the darkest of the series, despite the fact that it doesn't have a heart-wrenching death at the end of it like some of the others do. And I think that is because this is the last book before we plunge down the terrible pit of despair that George R. Martin has prepared for us. This is the last book where hope still lingers, and the most difficult to read, for me at least, because of that. I love it though because it managed to change my feelings about a lot of the characters in this series. For example, I started loving Tyrion in this book while I kind of just liked him in the first book. I also started liking Catelyn, where I kind of hated her in the first book, and same goes for Sansa, because she was absolutely unbearable in book 1, and here she actually gained humanity and went through things and through metamorphosis, and I quite liked where the author went with her character. I also loved seeing the awakening of magic in this book while it was more so ambiguous in the first one. Overall, I have nothing but nice things to say about this book, and I think it's yet another masterpiece by one of the most talented butchers in literature. The next book I picked up is Valor by John Gwynne. This is an adult fantasy and the second book in the Faithful and the Fallen series. Malice, which is the first book in this series, was the first book I read last year and I had the best time, gave it 5 stars. Chef's kiss. And when I started this one this month, I had the best of intentions to finish it before the end of the month, and I was so excited about it, and still am. But sadly, I have not finished it yet. I'm about 70%, 75 maybe, into it, and I am anticipating finishing it during today or tomorrow. But I still think I should count it in the books that I read in January because the majority of it was read in January. I will refrain from giving it a rating yet because obviously I haven't completed it, but so far it's looking like something between 4 and 5 stars. And last but definitely not least, I picked up First Man, The Life of Neil A. Armstrong by James R. Hansen. This is a non-fiction, and obviously it tells the story of Neil Armstrong, the first man who stepped on the moon. I own this book for about a year now, and I've been planning on picking it up for the longest time and never did until last month when I decided to participate in the Buzzword Reading Challenge by Kayla from Books and Lala. I will link her channel over here if you'd like to visit it. This is a reading challenge where every single month you get a prompt related to a specific word or a specific theme, and you have to read a book that matches that prompt. For January, the buzzwords were life and death, so I had to read a book that features either life or death in its title, and this one obviously does, so I decided this is a good opportunity to read this book. Now first, I would like to state that Neil Armstrong has been one of the most inspirational people for me ever since I can remember. His life is nothing short of magnificent, filled with hard work and great achievements and tragedy. I have nothing but respect and admiration for this great man. With that being said, I think this book is a little too heavy on the names and numbers and dry facts, and while factual truth is priceless on its own, this writing style makes the book hard to get into and the story hard to follow at times. Often the story will be interrupted by a lesson in engineering or another equally academic subject, making it slow and a little bit inaccessible. I wish that the author would have shaved some of the minute details while sticking exclusively to the truth, which would have made the book significantly shorter and kept the reader's attention better, at least this reader's attention. What I really appreciated though was the fact that the author debunked some of the urban legends related to Neil Armstrong and some of the sensationalism that is pushed forward by people who have financial interest in it. It was refreshing and I really appreciated it. And so I gave this book 3.5 stars and I was very glad to read it. And that's it. That's my wrap up for January. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I would be very happy to see in the comments down below what are the books that you read in January and whether you read any of those books and how you felt about them. Thank you so much for watching, and if you'd like to see my wrap up for December and TBR for January, check out this video. Bye!